The Palace of Veloria had been built to make visitors feel small. Its towers rose beyond the upper atmosphere, their silver foundations anchored deep beneath the capital, while their glass crowns touched the slow-moving rings of the planet. Inside, gravity shifted subtly from corridor to corridor, guiding guests toward the throne hall with the polite insistence of an invisible hand. Daniel Mercer noticed the trick only because the cup of ceremonial tea he carried kept leaning away from him. "Either your palace dislikes humans," he murmured, "or this drink is trying to escape." The royal attendant beside him, a solemn man with 4 golden eyes, considered the cup. "It has excellent instincts." Daniel almost laughed, but the enormous doors ahead opened before he could answer. Music rolled through the chamber, low and resonant, produced by floating instruments that shaped sound with beams of blue light. Hundreds of nobles turned toward him. Their clothing shimmered with living patterns, displaying family histories, military victories, and, in one unfortunate case, what appeared to be a dancing fish. At the far end of the hall sat Queen Elyra. She looked almost human, though no human woman possessed ears so long and elegant, rising through her silver blonde hair like narrow blades. Her violet eyes carried a calm intelligence that made Daniel straighten without realizing it. She wore white armor beneath a dark, ceremonial cloak, and the throne behind her was surrounded by holographic constellations representing every inhabited system under her rule. Daniel had repaired a failing reactor during the siege of Oranis, crossed a battlefield under plasma fire, and once argued with an artificial intelligence that believed oxygen was an unnecessary luxury. Yet walking toward the Queen felt more dangerous than all 3 combined. "Daniel Mercer of Earth," Elyra said as he reached the circular platform before her. Her voice carried naturally through the hall. "You preserved 3,000 lives and prevented the destruction of one of our oldest cities." Daniel bowed, though perhaps too deeply. The gravity field shifted, and the ceremonial tea slipped from his hand. A tiny service drone darted forward, caught the cup, and projected a red warning symbol over his head. Soft laughter spread through the court. Daniel looked up. "I assume that means I passed the first test." The Queen's lips curved. "It means the floor remains undefeated." At her gesture, 2 guards approached, carrying a long black case. The laughter faded. Even the floating instruments fell silent. Daniel saw the nobles stiffen as the case opened. Inside lay a sword unlike any weapon he had ever seen. Its blade was dark as polished obsidian, yet faint silver lines moved beneath the surface like currents beneath ice. The hilt was wrapped in pale metal, and at its center rested a crystal without color. "This belonged to King Arvin," Elyra said. Something changed in her expression, a shadow passing behind royal composure. "My former husband carried it during the Unification Wars. After his death, it became dormant. Our scholars have studied it for 42 years and found no remaining power within it." Daniel glanced at the sword. "So it is completely safe?" "Almost certainly." Those are comforting words in every language. A few nobles smiled, though the generals did not. Elyra descended from the throne and lifted the sword with both hands. For a moment, Daniel saw not a queen, but a woman holding the last object touched by someone she had once loved. "Accept it," she said, "as a symbol of trust between your people and mine." Daniel stepped forward. He hesitated before taking the hilt, afraid that touching it too quickly might seem disrespectful. Then he placed his hand around the cold metal. Nothing happened. Somewhere behind him, a noble released a disappointed breath. Daniel turned the sword slightly, examining the edge. "It is lighter than it looks." "You are holding it backward," Elyra said. Daniel froze. He looked down. "That explains why everyone appears concerned." The Queen laughed. a brief and genuine sound that startled the court more than his mistake. Daniel shifted his grip. The instant his palm pressed against the crystal, the entire throne hall went dark. The holographic stars vanished. The instruments dropped from the air. A deep vibration passed through the floor, climbing into Daniel's bones. Silver fire erupted along the blade. Ancient symbols blazed across its surface, each one unfolding into patterns too complex for the eye to follow. The crystal in the hilt filled with golden light. Every guard raised a weapon. Daniel tried to release the sword, but his fingers would not move. A pulse of energy burst outward, stopping inches from the queen before bending around her like water around stone. Above them, a colossal hologram formed. A human hand clasped with an alien one beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Then a voice emerged from the blade, old, calm, and unmistakably awake. Genetic covenant confirmed. Human bearer recognized. Silence swallowed the chamber. Daniel looked at Elyra. The queen had gone pale. Her long ears tilted slightly backward, the first visible sign that her composure had broken. "That," Daniel whispered, "does not sound completely safe." The sword brightened in his hand. "Primary master accepted," it announced. "Royal archive unlocked." Around the hall, nobles stepped back as though Daniel had become a bomb with opinions. Queen Elyra stared at the weapon, then at him, and for the first time since he had met her, she seemed unable to find words. Daniel remained in the center of the throne hall with the sword locked in his hand, while several hundred nobles considered the safest direction in which to panic. The guards had formed a ring around him, their plasma spears humming with enough energy to cut through armored vehicles. But none appeared eager to test whether the awakened relic objected to being threatened. Queen Elyra lifted one hand. "Lower your weapons." The command was quiet, yet every spear dimmed at once. Daniel looked at the glowing blade. "I appreciate that. I was beginning to feel unpopular." "You were unpopular before the sword awakened," said a thin minister near the throne. "Now you are alarming." The sword answered before Daniel could. "Correction. The bearer is insufficiently alarming. His stance suggests chronic uncertainty." Every face turned toward the weapon. Daniel stared at it. "Did the ancient royal sword just insult me?" "Assessment, not insult," it replied. "An insult would require greater creativity." A ripple of shocked laughter moved through the younger nobles, then died when the older counselors glared at them. Elyra stepped closer, her violet eyes fixed on the golden crystal in the hilt. "State your designation." "Strategic Covenant Blade, Archive Unit 7, commonly identified as Avaris." The queen's expression tightened. "Avaris was my husband's weapon." Previous bearer confirmed. "Then why did you never speak to us?" "No authorized master was present." The answer struck the hall harder than any explosion. Daniel saw pain flash across Elyra's face before she buried it beneath the calm mask of a ruler. For 42 years, her scientists, priests, and engineers had studied the sword, and all that time it had remained silent because it had been waiting for someone else. Unfortunately, that someone appeared to be a human who had nearly lost a duel with a cup of tea. Elyra turned to the council. "Seal the palace. No transmissions leave this chamber." At once, translucent barriers descended over the doors, and the holographic constellations above the throne dissolved into a network of security symbols. The minister with the narrow face bowed. "Your Majesty, the awakening signal has already crossed the internal grid." "Then erase it." "It has entered the planetary archive." "Erase that too." "It has reached the orbital relays." Elyra slowly looked at him. "Do you have any encouraging information?" The minister considered this. "The weather is pleasant." Daniel lowered his voice. I like him. You may keep him, Elyra replied. A team of royal scientists entered moments later, surrounded by floating scanners. They moved around Daniel cautiously, projecting green beams over his body and the blade. One machine attempted to approach the sword and was immediately struck by a pulse of light that sent it spinning into a decorative pillar. Intrusive device rejected, Avaris announced. The damaged scanner slid down the pillar, emitting a sad electronic whistle. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You could have simply said no. The machine lacked ears. Half this court has excellent ears. Several nobles glanced at Queen Elyra's long, pointed ears, then wisely looked elsewhere. The chief scientist, an elderly woman whose silver implants covered one side of her face, examined the readings. The weapon is drawing power from no visible source. Its energy output exceeds that of a battle cruiser. Daniel looked down at the blade. And it is still attached to my hand. A temporary inconvenience, she said. For you, perhaps. Elyra ordered the hall cleared, leaving only Daniel, the scientists, the guards, and the inner council. When the last doors sealed, Avaris projected a sphere of light above the floor. Inside it appeared the image of King Arven, tall and armored, his long ears marked by old battle scars. Elyra took one silent step forward. The recording flickered, but the king's face remained unmistakable. If this message has opened, he said, then the human covenant has been restored. Daniel felt the room contract around those words. Arven continued, Do not fear the bearer. Fear those who work to ensure he would never arrive. The image broke apart into fragments before anyone could speak. Then coordinates appeared, pointing toward a region beyond the palace system. Avaris rotated in Daniel's grip, forcing the blade toward the stars displayed on the wall. Primary archive location identified, it said. Access requires the queen and the human bearer. Elyra stared at the coordinates. That region is empty. Incorrect. Our surveys show nothing there. Your surveys were designed to fail. The golden light dimmed, and Daniel finally felt his fingers release. He nearly dropped the sword, but it rose by itself and floated beside his shoulder. Mobility protocol activated, Avaris said. Daniel stepped left. The sword followed. He stepped right. It followed again. You are going to do that all day, aren't you? Until your survival probability improves. Elyra looked from the weapon to Daniel, her earlier shock giving way to cold determination. Somewhere beyond the palace, alarms began sounding as unknown vessels entered the outer system. The queen turned toward the sealed doors. It seems the signal attracted company. Daniel glanced at the floating sword. Friendly company? Avaris brightened. Probability, 4%. Daniel sighed. Finally, some encouraging information. The Queen's shuttle left the palace beneath a false registry, disguised on every civilian sensor as a refrigerated cargo vessel transporting fermented sea plants. Daniel discovered this only after asking why the navigation display identified Queen Elyra as Captain Moisture. It is an old smuggler's code, she said from the pilot's seat. And somehow less dignified than your actual title, Daniel replied. Avaris floated beside him, secured inside a magnetic field that it had already escaped twice. The bearer's humor remained strategically unnecessary. You followed me into the washroom. The room contained 3 possible ambush points. It contained a sink. A poorly positioned sink. Elyra hid a smile as the shuttle accelerated beyond Veoloria's orbital defense platforms. Outside the viewport, the capital world curved beneath them, its oceans threaded with luminous cities and silver atmospheric towers. Above it hung thousands of ships, from royal dreadnoughts to merchant vessels spreading solar sails like transparent wings. Somewhere among them, the unknown craft that had entered the system were being quietly intercepted by the Queen's fleet. Elyra had refused an escort. A military formation would attract attention, she said, and the coordinates stored inside Avaris led to a region officially catalogued as empty. Daniel had learned that royal definitions of empty often included traps, forbidden ruins, and people trying to kill him. The shuttle entered a folded space corridor generated by two rotating rings beneath its hull. Stars stretched into pale ribbons. Gravity weakened, and Daniel's stomach rose toward his throat before the internal stabilizers caught up. Elyra remained perfectly composed. Humans react poorly to transition, she observed. We prefer reality to stay where we left it. A narrow-minded preference, Avaris said. 3 hours later, the corridor collapsed, releasing them into darkness. No stars appeared ahead. The region was hidden inside a cloud of microscopic machines that absorbed light, heat, and conventional scans. Their instruments reported empty space, even while the shuttle's proximity alarms began screaming. Elyra slowed the vessel. There is something directly in front of us. Avaris projected a golden pulse through the hull. The darkness peeled away. An enormous station emerged, ancient and silent, shaped like two interlocked crescents around a black central sphere. Its outer surface was scarred by impacts and covered in symbols that resembled both Valorian script and early human mathematics. Daniel leaned closer to the glass. How old is that? Older than my dynasty, Elyra whispered. Older than our recorded empire. The station opened before them without being commanded. A tunnel of white light formed, pulling the shuttle inward. Daniel touched the restraint across his chest. Should it be doing that? No. Excellent. I was worried this might be normal. They landed inside a vast chamber where artificial gravity returned in waves. The air was breathable, though dry and metallic. Elyra wore white combat armor beneath her cloak, and her long ears shifted toward every distant sound as she stepped onto the platform. Daniel followed with Avaris hovering at his side. The chamber awakened around them. Lines of amber light spread across the floor, connecting machines that had slept for millennia. Columns unfolded from the walls, releasing holograms of unfamiliar worlds. Several displayed oceans suspended above cities. One showed a moon wrapped in an artificial atmosphere. Another revealed human figures standing beside long-eared Valorians before a structure shaped like a gateway. Elyra stared at the images. These cannot be authentic. Authentication confirmed, Avaris replied. The First Covenant predates current calendars by 8,712 years. Daniel moved toward the nearest projection. A human woman in ancient pressure armor was laughing beside a Valorian officer. Their uniforms carried the same symbol, two hands beneath a divided star. Earth records have nothing like this. Neither do ours, Elyra said. The station responded to their voices. A doorway opened in the far wall, revealing a passage lined with crystalline panels. As they entered, the panels illuminated beneath Daniel's touch and again beneath Elyra's. No reaction occurred when either walked alone, but when they moved side by side, the corridor filled with music. It recognizes both species, Daniel said. It recognizes partnership, the Queen corrected softly. Their progress was slowed by ancient security tests, though not all were threatening. One chamber demanded a spoken declaration of peaceful intent. Another required them to place their hands together over a sensor. A third offered 2 sealed containers of preserved food. Daniel opened one and found a gray cube that immediately expanded into a steaming meal. Elyra tasted hers and frowned. This is human cuisine? Possibly. He tried a bite and coughed. Or insulation. Avaris scanned it. Nutritional value acceptable. Flavor value negligible. At last, something we agree on. Deeper inside, they reached a circular archive chamber. Thousands of memory crystals floated in zero gravity around a central console. When Daniel and Elyra approached, the crystals arranged themselves into a spiral resembling a strand of DNA. A recording appeared above them. King Arvin, younger than in the palace message, speaking beside an unknown human commander. "Our histories were not lost," Arvin said. "They were removed." The human beside him continued. "A faction within both civilizations feared what unity would create. They altered archives, destroyed gateways, and turned allies into myths." Elyra's face hardened. "Who?" The recording shifted, displaying a symbol of a broken crown surrounding a dark star. Before the answer could continue, every light in the chamber turned red. A mechanical voice announced that an unauthorized vessel had docked. Daniel looked at Elyra. 4%. Avaris ignited, flooding the chamber with silver fire. Revised probability of friendly intent. 0. The archive chamber sealed before Daniel could ask whether 0% was considered a scientific estimate or simply Avaris being dramatic. Heavy panels slid across every entrance, and the floating memory crystals dropped into armored recesses along the walls. Red light pulsed through the room like a slow heartbeat. Elyra drew a compact plasma pistol from beneath her cloak and checked its charge with the calm precision of someone who had survived too many assassination attempts to find them surprising. Daniel looked at the weapon, then at the sword hovering beside him. "I assume this is the part where I'm expected to know how to fight." "Your previous combat record is available," Avaris replied. "It contains optimism but little technique. I repaired a reactor under artillery fire. The reactor did not attempt to stab you." A violent impact shook the station. Dust drifted from the ceiling, though Daniel suspected that any dust surviving 8,000 years had earned the right to remain undisturbed. A section of the wall brightened, revealing a live tactical projection. 6 armored figures moved through the docking chamber, accompanied by 2 machines shaped like skeletal insects. Their insignia matched the symbol from the recording, a broken crown surrounding a black star. Elyra's long ears angled toward the distant metallic vibrations. They knew exactly where to come. "The activation signal," Daniel said, "or someone inside the palace told them." She did not answer, which was answer enough. Avaris rotated in the air and projected a narrow beam toward the floor. "Emergency route detected beneath this chamber. Destination, core archive." "And the intruders?" Elyra asked. "Destination, us." The floor opened into a vertical shaft. A platform rose from the darkness, scarcely large enough for 2 people and 1 judgmental sword. They stepped onto it as the sealed doors behind them began to glow beneath cutting beams. The platform dropped without warning. Daniel's stomach remained somewhere above. A countdown would have been polite. "Survival mechanisms are not required to be polite," Avaris said. "That explains you." The shaft carried them deep into the station, past transparent levels filled with ancient engines, frozen gardens, and rows of humanoid machines suspended in glass. Some had human proportions. Others bore the long ears and elegant bone structure of Elyra's people. Every chamber suggested that the 2 civilizations had once built more than an alliance. They had shared knowledge, cities, perhaps even bloodlines. The platform stopped inside a spherical room surrounded by shifting stars. At its center floated a crystalline model of the galaxy, with hundreds of forgotten routes linking Earth to Valorian space. King Arvin appeared beside it, his holographic armor cracked and stained from battle. This message lacked the formal calm of the earlier recordings. He looked tired. "Elyra," he said. The Queen went still. "If you are seeing this, then I failed to return." Daniel lowered his eyes, suddenly feeling like an intruder inside someone else's grief. Arvin continued. The Order of the Broken Crown infiltrated both our histories. They believe separation preserves stability. In truth, it preserves their control. I hid the Covenant archive because I could not expose them without proof. Images formed around him. Officials altering records, ships destroying ancient gateways, entire colonies erased from navigation systems. Then human faces appeared beside Valorian ones, not as enemies, but families. Daniel's breath caught. The original covenant included genetic exchange, Arvin said. Humanity and the royal bloodline were linked by design, not to create rulers, but guardians capable of activating technology neither species could command alone. Elyra looked at Daniel. That is why the sword chose you. Partly, Avaris said. The bearer also possesses unusual neural compatibility. Daniel frowned. That sounds impressive. It is rare, not impressive. Arvin's image turned directly toward them. The broken crown will come for the bearer. They will also come for you, Elyra, because together you can reopen the first gateway. The room shook again. A section of the outer wall exploded inward, scattering fragments that froze in a containment field before reaching them. One of the insect machines crawled through the breach, its limbs cutting grooves into the metal. Elyra fired first. Blue plasma struck its head, but the machine continued advancing. Daniel reached for Avaris. The sword snapped into his hand, igniting with silver light. Recommended action, it said. Try not to embarrass the dead king. Daniel raised the blade just as the machine lunged. The sword moved before he did, guiding his arm through a precise arc. Silver energy cut the attacker cleanly in half. Both pieces crashed to the floor and twitched. Daniel stared at them. I meant to do that. False statement recorded. More impacts sounded beyond the breach. Arvin's hologram flickered. The archive cannot fall into their hands. Reach the central engine. The sanctuary will obey only both bloodlines together. Elyra stepped beside Daniel, her pistol glowing in one hand. Then we go together. The station groaned around them as corridors shifted and ancient defense systems awakened. Avaris brightened, pointing toward a newly opened passage. Escape route available. Daniel glanced at the smoke pouring through the breach. Does it include fewer assassins? Temporarily. You really know how to inspire confidence. Confidence is inefficient. Run. They reached the shuttle with less dignity than either of them would later admit. Elyra arrived first, sliding beneath a closing blast door while firing backward into the corridor. Daniel followed a moment later with Avaris dragging him forward by the arm, as if the sword had concluded that human legs were an unreliable transportation system. The instant the hatch sealed, the station's defense grid awakened. Ancient cannons unfolded from the sanctuary's outer crescent, filling the darkness with white lances that struck the intruder's ship before it could disengage. The vessel split apart without sound, its fragments burning briefly in the cold light of the hidden stars. That was efficient, Daniel said, breathing hard. It was delayed by 8,000 years, Avaris replied. Efficiency is relative. Elyra took the controls and forced the shuttle away from the collapsing docking ring. Behind them, the sanctuary vanished beneath its cloud of light-devouring machines, sealing the archive once more. Daniel expected relief when Valoria appeared on the navigation display, but the Queen's silence made the return journey feel heavier than the escape. The holographic image of King Arvin remained suspended in Daniel's mind. The exhaustion in his face, the warning meant for a wife who had never known the truth, and the knowledge that someone inside the palace might already be waiting for them. When they landed beneath the royal complex, A squad of guards surrounded the shuttle. For one dangerous second, Daniel thought the betrayal had begun. Then the commander removed his helmet and bowed. "Your Majesty, the council has assembled. They are demanding the human surrender, the weapon." Daniel stepped down beside Elyra. "It's nice to be missed." The throne hall had changed since their departure. Gone were the musicians and ceremonial lights. The nobles stood in rigid rows beneath the dark constellations, while armed officers guarded every entrance. At the center of the chamber waited Chancellor Vorin, the thin minister who had called Daniel alarming. Now he looked almost pleased. "Your Majesty," Vorin said, "the sword's awakening has caused unrest across 12 systems. Religious orders are declaring omens. Military houses are questioning succession. 3 governors have requested permission to panic officially." Daniel leaned toward Elyra. "Is unofficial panic cheaper?" "Usually," she whispered. Vorin's gaze hardened. The human must be detained, and the relic returned to the crown. Avaris floated higher. "Request denied." Murmurs spread through the hall. One elderly lord pointed a trembling finger at Daniel. "The machine has been corrupted." "Correction," Avaris said. "The lord is 87% ceremonial." The younger nobles struggled not to laugh. Elyra walked to the throne but did not sit. "Daniel Mercer has stolen nothing. The weapon chose him according to protocols older than this empire." "Protocols no living scholar can verify," Vorin replied. "Conveniently revealed by a relic only he can command." Daniel studied him. The Chancellor's words were careful, but his left hand kept touching the black ring on his thumb. The same broken crown symbol they had seen in the archive was etched along its inner edge. Daniel felt cold spread through him. He turned slightly toward Avaris. "Can you display the king's final recording?" "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." Vorin's composure cracked. "This chamber is not an archive laboratory." "No," Daniel said. "It's better. Everyone who needs to hear it is already here." The sword flared before the Chancellor could respond. Golden light poured across the throne hall, forming King Arvin above the central platform. Gasps rose from every side. Elyra's late husband stood larger than life, wounded but unbowed. His voice filled the chamber. "If this message is being witnessed publicly, then concealment has failed. The Order of the Broken Crown exists within our government, our military, and our royal institutions." Symbols and names appeared around him. Several nobles stumbled backward as their family seals materialized among the records. Vorin remained still, but sweat shone at his temples. Arvin continued. "The sword was never property of the throne. It was created by the First Covenant to choose a bearer capable of restoring the alliance between humanity and Vyloria. If it has awakened for a human, then the Empire faces the crisis I feared." Vorin shouted, "End this fabrication!" He raised his ring. A pulse of black energy erupted from it, aimed directly at Daniel. Elyra moved first, throwing herself between them, but Avaris crossed the distance faster. The blade absorbed the attack, then released it upward in a column of silver fire that shattered the holographic ceiling. Guards seized Vorin as the broken crown ring melted around his hand. He screamed, more from terror than pain. The court fell silent. Arvin's recording turned toward Elyra. "Trust the bearer, not because he is human, but because the weapon found in him what our age has forgotten. Restraint when power is offered, compassion when fear would be easier, and humor in moments when everyone else becomes unbearable." Daniel looked around the hall. "I feel the last quality may be carrying the others." Elyra laughed softly, though tears had gathered in her eyes. The king's image faded, leaving one final set of coordinates floating above the throne. Avaris spoke into the stunned silence. First gateway located. Activation requires the Queen and the bearer. Elyra faced the court. Prepare my flagship. Then she looked at Daniel. You understand this may reshape the Empire. Daniel glanced at the sword. I was hoping for a quiet ceremonial gift. Expectation management remains poor, Avaris said. The Queen's flagship entered the uncharted system beneath complete communications silence, escorted by 12 warships flying no royal insignia. Beyond the forward viewport, a dead red star hung inside a veil of luminous dust, its fading light spreading across fields of frozen debris. The coordinates from King Arvin's message pointed directly toward the star, though every sensor insisted there was nothing there except radiation and fragments of ancient moons. Daniel stood beside Elyra on the command deck while Avaris hovered near his shoulder, glowing faintly as if irritated by the universe's refusal to reveal its secrets quickly. We have reached the location, Admiral Saren announced. There is no gateway. Your instruments are functioning correctly, Avaris said. They are simply inadequate. The Admiral's long ears tilted backward. I have commanded this vessel for 31 years. Then you have been inadequately informed for an impressive duration. Daniel coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Elyra did not bother hiding hers. She stepped toward the navigation sphere and placed her palm on its surface. What does the gateway require? Avaris descended between her and Daniel. The original covenant was built on shared authority. Royal blood grants access. Human neural structure provides stabilization. Daniel frowned. That sounds like a complicated way of saying we both touch something dangerous. Accurate. A circular platform rose from the deck, covered in symbols identical to those beneath the sword's blade. Elyra stood on one side, Daniel on the other. When they placed their hands against the central crystal, the ship's lights vanished. For one breath, the entire fleet drifted in darkness. Then the dead star opened. Its surface divided into vast geometric sections, revealing not burning gas but machinery hidden beneath a projected stellar shell. Rings larger than planets rotated around a black core. Energy surged through them, bending space until a corridor of white fire appeared across the system. Every ship alarm began sounding at once. Gateway active, Avaris announced. Daniel stared through the viewport. You might have mentioned it was disguised as a star. You did not ask a sufficiently intelligent question. Before the fleet could advance, hostile signatures emerged from the surrounding debris. Dozens became hundreds. Broken crown vessels unfolded from camouflage fields, their dark hulls releasing swarms of autonomous fighters. Plasma fire filled the system. The flagship shook as its shields absorbed the first strike. Admiral Saren shouted commands, and the royal warships spread into a defensive formation around the gateway. Elyra drew herself upright, every trace of humor leaving her face. They knew we would come. They have guarded this place for centuries, Avaris replied. Then they have had centuries to become overconfident, Daniel said. Elyra looked at him. Was that bravery? No. Panic wearing formal clothes. The flagship accelerated into battle. Rail cannons fired from its lower hull, sending metallic projectiles through enemy shields before they could adjust. Fighters streamed from launch bays, leaving trails of blue-white plasma across the dust cloud. Daniel and Elyra remained connected to the gateway platform, unable to move without collapsing the corridor. Each impact against the ship sent pain through the crystal and into Daniel's arms. Within the opened passage, images flickered into existence. Cities powered by miniature suns. Medical chambers rebuilding damaged organs, atom by atom. Vast gardens floating between worlds. The archive beyond the gateway contained technology capable of transforming every inhabited system in the Empire. It also contained weapons powerful enough to erase them. The gateway is unstable, an officer warned. Enemy interference is corrupting the alignment. A broken Crown cruiser broke through the defensive line and charged directly toward the flagship. Its forward weapon gathered black energy strong enough to tear open the ship's core. Admiral Saren ordered evasive movement, but the flagship could not turn without disrupting Daniel and Elyra's connection. Avaris flew into Daniel's hand. The blade can redirect the discharge. Can it survive? Uncertain. Can I? Less certain. Daniel raised the sword toward the viewport as the enemy cannon fired. Black light struck the flagship's shields, shattered them, and slammed into Avaris. The blade screamed with metallic voices drawn from thousands of stored memories. Daniel's knees buckled, but Elyra caught his shoulder without releasing the crystal. Silver fire spread from the sword into the gateway rings. The hostile energy changed direction, flowing through the ancient machinery and erupting behind the broken Crown cruiser. The enemy vessel disappeared in a silent sphere of white light. For a moment, both fleets stopped firing. Then the gateway released a pulse across the system. Every broken Crown ship lost power simultaneously. Their weapons died, their engines darkened, and their fighters drifted harmlessly through the dust. A calm voice emerged from the gateway, neither human nor Valorian. Covenant bearers authenticated. Defensive authority restored. The corridor widened. Beyond it waited an enormous artificial world covered in oceans, forests, towers, and glowing orbital rings. Admiral Saren stared at the site. That structure could support billions. It once did, Avaris said. And it may again. Elyra looked toward Daniel, her face illuminated by the newborn light of the gateway. The Empire will fight over what lies there. Then we give them something better to fight for. You say that as though it will be simple. Daniel looked at the disabled enemy fleet, the impossible world, and the sword smoking in his hand. Nothing involving you has been simple. Avaris flickered weakly. Observation accepted. Then, after a pause, it added, Your posture remains unacceptable. The first gateway remained open above Elyra for 9 days, a white ring visible even from the planet's oceans, while diplomats, scientists, soldiers, priests, and professional pessimists argued over what should pass through it first. Elyra ended the debate by sending medical teams. Within 48 hours, the ancient world beyond the corridor had restored sight to children injured by stellar radiation, rebuilt the failing organs of miners from the outer colonies, and produced clean energy cores for 3 planets that had been rationing power for decades. After that, even the loudest nobles found it difficult to insist the gateway was an evil omen, though several continued trying because tradition demanded effort. Daniel stood beside the Queen on the palace balcony, as thousands filled the capital's suspended avenues below. Human ships had arrived that morning, carrying historians and representatives from Earth. For the first time in nearly 9,000 years, the two civilizations met with proof that they had once been partners, rather than strangers. You look uncomfortable, Elyra said. Daniel adjusted the formal silver uniform the royal tailors had forced upon him. It has 7 collars. It has 1 collar. Then the other 6 are attacking independently. At his side, Avaris rested inside a transparent field. The sword's light had weakened since the battle, and its voice now carried a faint distortion. It had spent the previous days transferring its archive into a shared network controlled equally by Valorian and human custodians. Every hidden record had been released. The first covenant, the genetic bridge between the species, the broken crown's manipulation of history, and the names of those who had served the order. Chancellor Voren had confessed after learning the sword possessed 12 centuries of evidence and, more importantly, the ability to correct his grammar during interrogation. Across the Empire, Broken Crown cells had surrendered or fled. Their disabled fleet had been captured without further bloodshed, and Elyra had ordered public trials rather than executions. Fear built their order, she had told the council. We will not prove them right by answering fear with vengeance. Daniel had once thought royal strength meant never hesitating. Now he understood that Elyra's greatest strength was choosing restraint when everyone around her demanded punishment. She, in turn, had stopped treating trust as a weakness to be hidden behind ceremony. The change between them was quiet but visible. They no longer spoke as queen and honored guest, but as two people carrying the same impossible responsibility. The ceremony began when the holographic constellations above the palace rearranged themselves. Valorian systems appeared in violet. Human worlds burned gold. Then pathways of white light connected them, forming the restored map of the ancient alliance. Elyra stepped before the assembled council and planetary delegates. Her long ears rose through her silver-blonde hair, and her white armor reflected the stars above. The Empire was taught that survival required isolation, she said. Humanity was taught that the night between stars was empty. Both teachings were lies. Today, we replace them with a choice. She turned toward Daniel. Not an empire over humanity. Not humanity over us. A covenant between equals. The crowd remained silent for one breath, then another. Daniel placed his hand on the field surrounding Avaris. I came here as an engineer who hoped to repair machines and avoid ceremonial speeches. I have failed at one of those goals. Laughter moved through the balcony and down into the avenues. The sword did not choose me because I was descended from some forgotten hero. It chose me because humanity still carried a fragment of the first covenant. But blood opened only the first door. What mattered afterward was whether we walked through it together. Elyra placed her hand beside his. The field vanished. Daniel took Avaris by the hilt, and the blade ignited one final time. King Arvin appeared above them, not as a warning now, but as a peaceful image recorded before his final mission. He looked toward Elyra with unmistakable tenderness. If the covenant has returned, he said, then grief has served its purpose. Do not build the future around my absence. Elyra's composure trembled, but she smiled. I won't, she whispered. Arvin turned toward Daniel. And, to the next bearer, the sword was never meant to create a king. It was meant to find someone willing to return power to everyone. The image faded. Avaris spoke softly. Archive transfer complete. Covenant authority distributed. No single bearer required. Daniel felt the sword grow lighter. The golden crystal dimmed until it became clear and colorless. Are you dying? He asked. Incorrect. I am becoming unnecessary. That sounds suspiciously noble. Your influence has been unfortunate. Elyra laughed through her tears. Daniel lowered the blade. Will you still criticize my posture? There was a long silence. Then Avaris answered, barely louder than a breath. Someone must. The light vanished completely. Below them, the crowd erupted as the first human and Violorian exploration ships entered the gateway side by side. Months later, the old sword hung in a simple case in the new Covenant Hall, not above a throne, but between two doors, one leading to the human embassy, the other to the Valorian Council. Daniel stayed on Valoria as chief engineer of the Gateway Project, though Elyra insisted his true title was the man who activates dangerous relics without permission. He became more patient, less eager to hide uncertainty behind jokes. but he never lost the humor that had carried him through fear. On quiet evenings, he and Elyra walked beneath the palace's artificial stars, discussing new worlds, old mistakes, and the future they were building one careful decision at a time. Occasionally, when Daniel stood badly near the sword's display, the crystal seemed to flicker. He never mentioned it. Neither did Elyra. Some legends deserved dignity. Others deserved one final joke.